Hi, everyone. My name is Becc, if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. So like Savannah mentioned, I would like to keep this as engaging as possible. So if you have questions, why don't we have everyone ping in the chat if you can with your name, your role, company, and one thing you want to know or uncover when it comes to discovery. That could either be something that's difficult, questions that you should ask, but something that you want to know when it comes to discovery, because we're going to go very discovery focused within this conversation. That's name, company, role, and then one thing that you would be interested in covering in discovery. I'm going to go as quickly as I can. We're going to dive in here, but we're basically going to go into diagnostic selling. What I have how to multi-thread without being disrespectful during the first conversation. That's great, Jacob. Thanks for the ping in. But we're gonna dive in here. I'm gonna go as deep as I can. But if you have questions, concerns, comments, as much as I love self-righteous monologues, which trust me, I do. I would like to make it as engaging as we can. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and then I'm going to try and cover them as much as I can. But we're going to dive in here. We're going to go into 3 different topics today. The first topic is we're going to do a brief kind of thesis statement on the difference on pain versus problem. What are the differences there and what's the impact of the difference? We're then going to go into diagnostic selling, what I'm calling diagnostic selling. So basically how to diagnose for your prospects in the room. What are the 3 steps? What are you diagnosing? What should you be after discovering in discovery? Why should you be after that? And then if we have time, we're going to finish off with the 12 types of problems that you can uncover that your buyer is likely trying to solve whenever they are purchasing anything, whether that be B2B software, stick a gum, why are they doing that, and how can you be a part of the conversation, add to the conversation, truly add value? I know it's a loosely thrown around term, but how do you do that? How do you engage with the customer at the front desk? Okay, these are all really, really great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Famous last words here. So we're gonna hop here into the deck. But basically, this is the deck, and like I mentioned, let me know if you can or can't see my screen. But this is what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start off with the difference of pain versus problem for topic 1. So we're going to do kind of a brief review here. But the difference between pain versus problem, and I've heard a lot about pain-based selling over the years. I mean, there's obviously a famous name that is known for pain-based selling. But the difference in pain versus problem from a high level to kind of set today's conversation is that a pain is going to be any negative experience in the present. So that could be on a scale of 1 to 10, a 1, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9. It could be something that's deafening, could be something that's just annoying. But a pain is just any kind of negative experience that someone is running into in the present, or potentially will run into in the future. A problem, and the difference between those two is, a problem is anything someone wants to solve or solve for. So the problem with the difference there is, or the impact of the difference is, not all pains are problems. Meaning, not all negative things in the present am I going to solve for, and not all problems are painful yet. So when I hear most sales reps digging into conversations, and by the way, if you're a BDR, SDR, someone who's on the front line, when it comes to prospecting, when I hear them asking questions on these cold calls, if you're going after pain, you're going after something that someone already knows about, and that they have self-declared, if you're going from an outbound perspective, that it's not painful enough for them to solve for. Because if it was painful enough, they would have already solved for it. They would have already made a move. So they're kind of self-electing that it's not something that's impactful enough. So there are a couple conditions on when a pain will become a problem. So there's only really two times that someone will take a pain and that will transition into a problem, meaning they will actually do something about it. So there is pain everywhere. I mean, for instance, my neighbors upstairs are really, 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 really loud. Really loud. But I haven't quite done something about it yet because it's not painful enough quite yet. So there's only 2 reasons that someone would take a pain and turn it into a problem, meaning they're going to actually do something about it. So there's a number of different risks in doing something about it. Number one, you have to give your time. Number two, you're not sure if the solution will actually work. So it has to reach a certain threshold. So the first time that someone will do something about it, meaning it'll take a pain and start to solve for it and it turns into a problem, is the level of acute pain is big enough in the present. So my neighbors, for instance, are tray loud, make a lot of noise, okay? It sounds like they're bowling upstairs. They're constantly, I'm like, I don't know if you have a pogo stick. I really can't understand how you make so much noise. But I haven't done something about it yet, meaning I haven't gone to the landlord. I haven't, on and on. Because the pain isn't big enough quite yet. But if they were to get even louder, if they were to be playing music at night, if they were to invite all their friends over and then the noise got so high, I would all of a sudden start to do something about it. So the first reason why someone would turn a pain and take it into a problem is the level of acute pain is high enough in the present. The second instance of when someone will take a pain and turn it into a problem, meaning they'll start to do something about it, is the level of impact, either current impact, future impact, or potential impact, raises so high that it warrants them doing something about it. So for instance, let's say that I thought that normally the noise is typically mostly in the evening. So let's say all of a sudden that they started making that same level of noise really, really loud, but during the day. What that would change for me is, for instance, on this webinar, if they were making it during the day, then I would do something about it, because the current impact to me would be that I would be super distracted, y'all couldn't hear me, and so there would be extended pain there. So the level of acute pain in the present has to be high enough, or the impact of not solving for it has to be high enough for someone to take a pain and turn it into a problem. So the impact of not knowing that difference, especially from an outbound perspective, and especially from the selling perspective too, when AEs get into discovery, I see a lot of AEs go into discovery and they're like, okay, I found pain, so I'm all good. But the reality is that people aren't going to solve for pain unless it's egregious enough. So just finding pain isn't big enough. It isn't good enough anymore. So a problem is, meaning something someone's going to solve for, is only going to be solved for really to achieve one of three things: to alleviate a pain in the present, prevent a definite pain or impact from happening in the future, or avoid a potential pain from happening in the future. So these are the three conditions from a problem. So this is just kind of a review, and now we're going to go into diagnostic selling, but just from a high level, difference with a pain and a problem. So pain is any negative experience. We don't solve for all of them. We don't have enough time. And a problem is something that someone's going to solve or solve for, or solve for. That's the difference there. So I want to go into diagnostic selling. That's really just to set the stage here. But when it comes to discovery, there's a lot of different methods that I've seen people execute. And usually they're going to fall into one of three categories for discovery methodologies. They're going to fall into a name-based, meaning they're going to name it after the person, like Sandler selling, for instance. It's going to be a function-based, meaning like, let's say, challenger sale, that they're after doing one type of action in the room, customer-centric selling, etc. Or it's going to be a acronym-based, to get a certain amount of criteria. So let's say BANT or MEDIC or MEDPIC, and people have been turning those into methodologies. So the one thing that I was left with after reading all of those methodologies, and after thinking about discovery, what are the best questions to ask? What are you really trying to accomplish? I was really, after all of those methodologies, was left with one real question. What is the goal of a discovery call that's for the benefit of my buyer? How could I turn a discovery call to a call that was truly valuable for my buyer? And so the thing that I uncovered, or the thing that I realized, let's say that, is when I'm in a sales conversation and I'm getting qualified to death, or the seller's asking me questions, trying to get me to admit pain, to get me to close, there's really only one type of value that I really want as the buyer. Things that I don't know. That is the value that you can be to a buyer, is by uncovering things for the buyer that the buyer doesn't know. Usually the buyer is going to jump on the line for discovery, and there's only going to be one piece of information that they don't have that they believe that you do have as the seller. So they ask for it right up front. Let's see if anyone can guess, if you jump in the chat, what is the one piece of information that typically the buyer wants that they believe that the seller had? Brendan already got it. Price. It's just price. They think they don't have that information and you do have that information. So they ask for price right away. They don't want you to ask discovery questions because they believe in their core, based on their experience, that the goal of your discovery questions is to make them feel like they should want to buy more. The reality is, and then we're going to jump into these 3 steps, buyers and sellers are at war. And the reason for that is, if y'all wouldn't mind, jump into the chat. As a buyer, when I'm buying a product, what am I trying to buy that product to enable to do? What am I trying to do by buying a product? What's my goal as a buyer when I'm buying anything? Whether that be B2B SaaS, whether that be, any kind of MarTech. There you go. Luis already got it. My goal is to solve a problem. Bingo. Jose got it too. So I'm gonna make y'all keep going. So okay. So I'm trying to solve a problem as a buyer. Do I want to buy a lot of products to solve my problems or a few amount of products? Which one do I want? Bingo. Michael got it. Nico got it. I want to buy as few products as I can to solve my problems. And do I want to buy those at a high price point or a low price point as a buyer? Low. So my goals as a buyer is to buy as few products as possible at the lowest price point as possible to solve my problems. I want to transition for a second. As a seller, net, what are you goaled as a seller professionally to do? What is your goal in a selling conversation? What are you trying to do? Yep. Brendan already got it. I'm trying to sell stuff. And yes, I'm trying to see if I'm a good fit for the customer. I'm trying to help. But at the end of the day, I'm hired, fired, promoted, demoted as a seller based on Jose, it got it, selling. How much quota did I make? So I want to sell the most amount of products to do that. And I want to sell them at a high ticket price to do that within the realm of ethics. Because my goal as a seller is to hit quota. So as a buyer, I'm trying to buy as few products as I can at the lowest price point to solve my problems. And as a seller, I'm trying to sell as many products as I can at the highest price point to hit my quota. So these two parties in this conversation have mutually exclusive goals. So they're at war. So the power that the buyer doesn't want to give over to you as a seller is pain, or the gravity of what happens if they don't buy the product. Because if they give you all of that information, yes, I really need this product. These are all the reasons that I need this product. If I don't have it, then I'm going to be screwed because I'm not going to be able to blank, blank, and blank. They're afraid that they're going to give you power and that as a seller, you're going to do one thing with that information. Let's see if anyone can guess it. Why would I be afraid as a buyer to give you leverage, to tell you that I need your product, that I have to have your product, that it's going to solve a ton of problems for me? Yep, you're going to lose control. Yep, Sebastian nailed it. Because you as a seller can hold your price at that point. I just got goosebumps. Y'all are killing it. Then I'm like, I'm afraid as a buyer, if I give you more pain and all the impact that happens to me and that I don't have a ton of options, you're the only one. As a seller, you're going to have confidence to hold your price point, and you will. So usually when I hear people talking about pricing, it's like the first one who talks loses. Because as a buyer, I don't want to buy something at $100 that I could have bought at $50. And as a seller, I don't want to sell something at $50 that I could have sold you at $100. So these two parties easily withhold information from each other because they're at war on the floor. So I'm going to go into the 3 steps of diagnostic selling. In my experience, when you start asking questions to diagnose, and your buyers can feel it, whenever you're leading them somewhere. When you're like, what's the impact to your business, Tim? If you weren't to buy this product, how will that affect you? Why is this a priority? They can feel it. Like, the punchline is they're really smart. I don't know how to say it other than that. That when you ask those pain-based questions, they can feel it and they start to shut down. So this is going to be gold on. Instead of just getting pain information to build your case of why they should be buying, I want to transition the mindset to how do I ask questions to be able to diagnose in the room. So a doctor and a lawyer both ask questions. They're both pretty much paid, very high paid, to ask questions. The difference between those two, and why one is seen as a helper and one is seen as a little bit sleazy in a lot of cases, is the agenda and the goal of those questions. As a lawyer, I'm trying to ask questions in a certain way, in a certain manner, to get a witness to admit things so that I can prove that someone is guilty or not guilty. I have an agenda. My agenda is to prove something. So I ask questions in a manner because that is the goal. So a great lawyer asks the right questions to get someone to admit things to prove that they're guilty or innocent. A doctor also asks questions, but their goal is to diagnose. What they win and lose on, essentially, is do they identify the problem and do they solve it correctly? That is what they're goaled on. So I want to transition everyone's mindset from, instead of asking the perfect question to get my buyer to think or to make them admit things, that they're in pain so that they'll want to buy more and I can use that against them if they go dark on me. I want to transition everyone's mindset to, how do I ask questions with the goal of diagnosis? In my experience, your buyers start to open up more, number one. But number two, naturally, then you don't have to worry about what's the next best question to ask, because you're not worried about manipulating someone. You're just worried about, how do I get the best information so that I'm able to diagnose correctly? So there's going to be 3 steps to this process. And the first step is going to be, how do I uncover my prospect's self-diagnosis? So the first thing that you want to do in the room with your prospects is uncover what they think, what they have self-diagnosed. So thanks to WebMD, I've heard upwards of 95% of patients have self-diagnosed what they think the problem is. So the first step to the conversation, not the most important step, but certainly the first step, is to uncover what they have self-diagnosed, what do they believe, and why do they believe that? Because you're going to use that to build your own diagnosis. So patient walks into a doctor's office and they'll usually say, why are you here today? But I'm trying to uncover my prospect self-diagnosis. So there's 7 things you're trying to uncover. And they might lead with one of them, and then your job is just to fill in the blanks of what they have self-diagnosed. Some of these they haven't self-diagnosed, but they usually, especially if they come inbound, they have done some of these 7. So the first thing I'm trying to uncover is, what is their self-diagnosed problem? What is the problem that they want to solve? And why do they think that this is truly the right problem to be solving? So maybe they come in and they say, like, I'll use flip the script examples all the way through. So maybe they come and they say, so the thing that I want to solve is my BDRs are behind quota. They have a quota of 10 meetings, per month. And they're only at 3 per month. So that's the problem that they want to solve. So the first step is uncovering what is a self-diagnosis? What is the thing that they want to solve, the problem that they want to solve? The second piece of this is, what is their self-diagnosed root cause? So maybe they even lead the conversation and they're like, hey, Becc, I really want to improve the quality of my emails. So that's a self-diagnosed root cause. What they really want to solve is that they're hitting quota. But they think how they change that, how they do hit quota, is by changing a root cause, the state of a root cause. So what do they think is truly the root cause of the problem? So they think in this instance, essentially, that their BDRs are behind quota because of the quality of their emails. And why do they think that this is the root cause of the problem? So I'm really, in the first step, trying to just uncover what they believe. Now, 2 important things before we keep going here. Number 1 is I am taking into account that they are not an expert because they're not paid to be an expert in my field. That's your job, right? So I'm taking with a huge grain of salt that a lot of the time they are incorrect in what they think is the root cause. So a lot of times people say like, hey, I think it's the quality of my emails. And I know in the back of my mind that yes, quality can be one cause, but actually email deliverability, did they even get the email, is also going to be a huge cause for people not responding to these emails. So number 1, I would keep in mind that a lot of the times they have not self-diagnosed correctly, which we're going to get into in webinar 2. But the second thing that I think is very important from a tactical perspective is when they tell you a root cause or a problem that they've self-diagnosed, I want you, this is just my advice tactically in the moment. I want you to resist the urge to correct them. Don't tell them that you don't think that it's quality in the moment. My first step is I'm just trying to get out all the information that they think. So I would resist the urge to try and correct them if you don't believe it's a true root cause. So the second piece of information is, what is the self-diagnosed root cause that they think, that they believe is impacting them? The third piece of information is the current impact. How do they think that this problem, not hitting quota, is currently impacting them? And I am really just after what they offer up. What do they think is the current impact of the problem? Maybe they haven't really diced it out in their head. And why do they believe that this current impact is the way that it is? I wouldn't try and get them to self-diagnose. I'm just trying to uncover, if there is a self-diagnosis, what is it? So this is the third step. How do they believe that this is impacting them? So the difference usually between a problem is going to be tied to their metric. So for a marketer, for instance, it's going to be tied to like MQLs. BDR would be book meetings. AE, it's going to be close won, quota attainment. CSM, for instance, be upsell, cross-sell, churn, or NPS score. But an impact is going to be what happens to them, what's currently happening to them that's an extended pain. So they might not have this in all cases. The fourth piece here is, what's the future impact? What do they believe will happen to them if they don't solve the problem? What do they believe, and why do they believe this? Usually future impact, in my experience, people will not give you right off the bat, and I wouldn't hunt after it. Meaning, if they tell me like, hey, I want to fix this problem because I'm afraid that I'm going to get churned as a leader, for instance, if I don't start hitting quota, then I'm definitely going to take that information. And I would want to understand, why do they believe that? Did they recently have a conversation with their boss? Is there pressure, that's coming from some of the C-level, for instance? But what do they believe is the future impact of not solving the problem? Is going to be the fifth piece here. The next piece is a current event trigger. So a current event trigger is, what is the last event that happened that made them ultimately want to solve the problem? So the difference between a current impact and a current event trigger is, a current impact is, how is this problem affecting them? A current event trigger was, what was the last straw that made them want to solve it? Essentially, what was the last piece of data that finally enough was enough? That you're like, okay, essentially, why did they get in the game to go ahead and try and solve this? Because again, buying something is risky. If I buy something, I'm putting my credibility out on the line. I'm putting my name out on the line. I'm not sure that this will actually work. If it doesn't work, I've essentially sped up getting fired, but buying something is risky. So what is the current event trigger that happened that said, okay, I'm finally going to solve this? So let's say, for instance, that I wanted to solve this problem with the noise above me. The current event trigger could have been they had a party and it was incredibly loud. So that was a final straw that I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve for this. But a current event trigger is what is the thing that finally prompted them to solve for it, and why do they think that this makes the problem worth solving? A future event trigger is, what is the future event that's going to happen that makes them want to solve for the problem today? So let's say, for instance, that I have a future event of, I have a huge webinar that's going to happen in front of 15,000 people, and it's going to be at night in 2 months. That's a future event that makes me say, okay, I want to solve for this noise problem today, because in 2 months, I don't want to be distracted at night when the guys are like bowling upstairs and then everyone can hear it during the webinar. So the difference between a future impact is what's going to happen to them that's painful if they don't solve the problem. A future event trigger is just, what is the event that they believe will that they will have pain because of if they don't solve for it today. So that's the final straw that's going to make them say, it is now worth it for me to solve this problem. Another example is, I trained for a marathon last year. And I had the future event of, I was trying to run the New York Marathon. So I bought an iPhone 14 months beforehand. And the reason I did was, I believed that if I was to lose charge in the middle of that marathon, then it would affect me. I wouldn't be able to listen to music, might affect my mental state, and I might not be able to finish the marathon because of it. So the future impact was, I wouldn't be able to finish the New York Marathon if I didn't solve for it today. The future event trigger was the marathon itself, essentially. So this is the 6th piece of data that I'm after acquiring. Again, they're not always going to have all of these, but they're going to have some portion of them. And then the last one is the solution. What is a self-prescribed solution? What do they believe is the solution? So let's say someone came into the room and they said, like, hey, so I want to buy a cold emailing training from you. I want you to train, I've got 50 reps and I want you to train for them. So I saw a question in here earlier that was a great question of how to ask impact questions. How do I ask these questions? So reality is, in a discovery call, you're going to get a smattering of different data at the beginning, or on a cold call, you're going to get a smattering of different data points, and your job is to fill in the gaps. So if someone left in or let in the conversation, said, I want cold email training services, I'm like, oh, there's a self-prescribed solution. They believe that they need cold emailing training. But I have one question in my head at that point. Let's see if anyone can guess it. They're like, I need someone to train me on cold emailing and cold calling. My team on cold emailing and cold calling. It's a self-prescribed solution. What's the one? Yeah, Sebastian nailed it. Why? I ask why more than anything. I ask in a variety of ways. But for the self-diagnose portion, I'm like, why? Why? Now, at that point, I'd be like, if you don't mind me asking, why do you say that? And they could be like, well, our emails are shit. Sorry, Savannah, I get one or two swear words per session. They're like, our emails are shit. I'm like, okay, so there is a self-diagnosed root cause. They think that their emails are crap. And I'd be like, well, why do you say that? Are you taking a look at their emails, or what are the open rates or reply rates? And be like, yeah, well, our open rates, are only 8% and our reply rates are under 1%. So that's why they believe this is the root cause. So now at this point, I have the solution and I have the root cause, but I still don't have the problem. The problem is always as a triple asterisk mark. It's always going to be rooted to their metrics. So I'd say something to the degree of, I transition. Okay, so if you don't mind me asking, how are they based from a quota perspective? Are they on booked meetings? Are they on SQL? Yeah. So they're on SQLs. What's a definition of an SQL? Is it someone has budget, someone has authority, blah, blah. What's the raw quota volume? What are they at historically? What are they at what have they been at over the last couple months? So I'm asking questions to uncover from there. They led with the solution. They're like, I want cold email at trainings, services, and I want to go from there and say, like, essentially, if you don't mind me asking, why do you say that? They're like, my cold emails are crap. And then I'm transitioning into, okay, what are the KPIs? What are they gold on? Are they sub-quota, blah, blah, so that I can fill in the gap of what's the actual problem that they want to solve. So the future impact, let me roll the tape forward, is usually going to be they're afraid they're going to get fired. Like for everyone. Everyone's just trying to keep their job, really, especially in this economy. That's usually going to be around the impact. Unless they're like a CEO or CRO, they're worried about market share and they're worried about, But this is usually the future impact, is they're worried about losing their job or looking bad. So I'm after asking the questions to understand why, so that I can understand what is all this, what are they afraid of? What are they trying to solve, so I know what they're afraid of, so that I have layer one. So layer one is only their self-diagnosis. Best case scenario. And I mean this. I'd say 0.5% of reps get this first step. Meaning acquire just this information. Usually they're after pain. They're like, what's the pain? 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 Which is great. Maybe they're sub 7 meetings, from quota. Let's like role play an example. Let's say they said they need cold emailing training services. Their root cause was their cold emails are crap. The reason they think that is because their open rate is 8% and their reply rate is 0.5%. Their problem is that they have, they're only at 3 meetings of the SQL per month. They need to be at 10. How long has that been going on? It's been going on for the last 6 months. When did they get in the role? Oh, they got in the role 8 months ago. And the current event trigger, if I'm like, if you don't mind me asking, why solve for it now? What happened to make you want to take the call today? They're like, yeah, so I just had to put my rep on a PIP. So that was a current event trigger. They're like, crap, I had to put my rep on a PIP. And they're like, and I have C-level, flying in, in a couple of weeks for an SKO where I'm supposed to talk about the current state of the SDR team. So again, they're not going to have all of these, but I want to inquire, what do they believe and why do they believe it? And what do they want to solve for? And why do they want to solve for that? So I can understand just step one. But I mean it when I say I'm being generous. I think 0.5% of AEs actually acquire all of this information in the discovery call. Here's what makes it really, 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 I can't think of another word, paralyzing, is this is only step one. I don't want to be banked on, gold on, and measured on as a doctor what my patients believe. And the reason I don't want to be measured on that is because my patients are going to be wrong all the time because they didn't go to medical school. It's not their job to be right. It's my job as the doctor to be right. So step one is just uncovering what they believe and why they believe it. But step two is developing your own diagnosis. What for the exact same 7, what problem do I believe they should solve? What root cause do I believe is causing the actual problem? What do I believe the current impact is? What do I believe the future impact is? What do I believe are all the current event triggers that make the problem worth solving currently? What do I believe are the future events that are going to happen that make the problem worth solving for today? And what do I believe the solution is? We're going to get into all of this in the second webinar on what you should challenge and why you should challenge it. But essentially, it's going to come down to two pieces of information that your buyer might be missing. Number one, they might have misdiagnosed something. They believe that their root cause is crap emails, but it's actually not that at all. It's what time of day they're sending them, and it's email deliverability, for instance. So you're going to have a ton of misdiagnoses, and then you're going to have a ton of missed diagnosis. The difference in the medical profession between a misdiagnosis and a missed diagnosis is a misdiagnosis is something that they self-diagnose, and they self-diagnose it incorrectly. They think that it's crappy cold emails. It actually isn't that at all. It's the time of day that they're sending them. A misdiagnosis is a root cause that they missed entirely. Yes, it is cold email quality, but actually it's their cold calls, the volume of their cold calls that they're making. So if I'm going off of, and I've heard, I cannot tell you, and I'm just going to bring the heat, because what's going to happen to me? If there's negative repercussions, I'll just go to Paris tomorrow. I cannot tell you the amount of influencers that I have heard say that when a prospect comes to you and say that they need something, to just sell it to them and to get out of the way. The problem with that is if you sell it to them and they were wrong, they actually don't need that thing at all. They need something completely different. Ethically, that's on you. Because you just sold them a thing and you got out of the way. Because in your head, if that's your mindset, in your head, the only thing to you in sales was to just sell as much shit as you could. Sell as much crap as you could. And I believe that sellers want to help their prospects. I believe that. I don't believe that they have bad things out for their prospects. So I have to ask a certain amount of questions to understand, are they correct that the solution that they think is going to solve their problem will actually solve their problem? And do they need anything else? Do they need anything else? So as a seller, this is your only this is the only job you have, is to be able to diagnose more correctly than your prospect. Maybe they diagnose something incorrectly. Maybe they miss something else that they're going to need. I'll give you a great example. I just got a new apartment in Paris, right? And so I'm trying to decorate it, paint it, and get electricity hooked up and all of that using 7 weeks of French. I literally electrocuted myself and touched a live wire. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll just try the French and call TaskRabbit. But point being, when these people are coming over, electricians, plumbers, internet service, if they were to say, do you need this wire? My answer would be, I don't know. I have no freaking clue. One of the electricians who has won the lion's share of the rest of my business is because he said, by the way, I don't know if you're going to plan on buying any kind of lighting fixtures in the US, because he said, you're from the US, correct? And I said, yes, we. And he said, but they have different volumes of electricity. So if you buy something from the US, it will likely short your building. Your landlord's going to try and kick you out. So you need to buy all of your lighting fixtures, France-based or from Amazon France, if you're going to do that. And I'm like, that is something that I didn't know. Why? I'm not the expert. I electrocuted myself to the ground. So you need to know all of the information that your buyers don't know. So what are all the problems that in solving will help them avoid the impact? What are all the root causes that they don't typically know about, and are they running into any of them? So for instance, a great question to ask is, they say they're like, my cold emails are terrible. Like, what makes you say that? Oh, well, we're only getting a 3% reply rate. I'm thinking in my head, I don't correct them in the moment, but I'm like, actually, for an outbound perspective, the average reply rate that I've seen is 0.5%. Looking at thousands of companies, 0.5% reply rate. Industry average for open rate is 15 to 25. Usually it's a 15 to 25 open rate, not because of email quality. If you have anything less than a 50% open rate, it's because of email deliverability issues. But they don't know that. But it's my job to know that. So root cause is email deliverability. So for instance, if you're sending any subject lines that are the same, it's going to hurt your email deliverability. If you're sending over anything over 50 emails a day, it's going to hurt your email deliverability, not only for you, but for your entire team. If you're sending them equidistant, 105, 110, 115, 120, it's going to hurt your email deliverability. If you're using more links, are going to hurt your email deliverability. You're using, I'll put a list in the chat, but there's a list of essentially 100 words that will flag you, like even the words not spam, problem, solution, free, exclamation points, all going to hurt your email deliverability. My buyer doesn't know that. So they think it's all about quality, but I'm like, actually, it's less about quality. It's about the fact that you sent out, 50 emails all at 1 minute that Google can almost like lock you out at that point for doing that. And they're all the same subject line. So it's much less to do with this, with the quality of the subject line. It's the fact that they were all the same. Or for instance, if you put the word LinkedIn in your subject line, it's going to flag it as a promotion. It's going to send it to social promo, which you're not going to read it as a buyer. So they say it's because of crappy email quality, that they don't know their buyer. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to have to ask some more questions to see what the emails actually look like. So I'm like, hey, can you log into your sales engagement instance? Usually I'll walk them through it. Like, can you just share your screen? And then I look through, their open rate. Here's another great example. A lot of times people will say, yes, we have a really high reply rate. And I'm like, what's a high reply rate? They're like 14%. And I'm like, that's not normal. So I'll say, if you don't mind me asking, are you comfortable sharing your screen? They're like, yeah. So they log into sales engagement, and I'm like, okay, so let's use outreach, for instance. I'm like, okay, can you click on your most popular campaign? I'll look at the look on their face. I'm like, crap, they don't know that. So I'll say, can you click on campaigns or reports? And I'm going to hybrid down to their most active campaign where they loaded the most prospects. And I'm going to say, can you click into that actual campaign? Because at the top, it can say a 20% reply rate because it's incorporating whenever the reps went through a cold call that they logged manual disposition, they're counting that as a reply. So I'll say, can you go into email one? I'll look over at email one. It's like 0.3% reply rate. And I'll take a screenshot. I'm like, do you mind if I take a screenshot? I'm like, okay, so we got a 0.3 reply rate for email one. I'm like, can you scroll down? Like at email two. I'm like, a 0.4 reply rate here. Can you keep scrolling? And I can see the look on their face that they're like, shit, and I don't correct them. It needs to be a safe space where your buyer knows you're after their good. But I'm like, 14% reply rate? I'm like, no way. Click into that email campaign because I know they read it at the top and they're like, oh, I got a 14% reply rate. And I'm like, no, you don't, Brendan. I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But then I go into the emails and it's like 0.3%, 0.4%, 0.7%. So I'm like, so roughly here, I'm looking at, you have about an average of a 0.5% reply rate. I don't say you're wrong or how did you not know this? But I'm like, so now I can understand a root cause. So they're like, crap, I thought that my problem was quota. And I thought that a indicator of that, but I couldn't understand it because I have such a high reply rate. And I'm like, you don't have that high of a reply rate. So now we can go into root cause and like, can you show me an example of the email? Can you show me an example of this, that, and the other? And I'm guiding them through that process because they're not paid to be the expert. They're coming to you, begging you to know more than them. If those plumbers would have asked me like, or the internet guy, oh, what do you need? I'm like, I don't know. So even if your buyer comes at you and they're used to it because they're used to crappy sellers, they're used to sellers who want to sell them things that they're not sure if it can help them. But here's the crazy thing. The way to, and I cannot tell you how many influencers I've heard say this. They're like, the way to increase the size of the problem is to get them to define it. I'm like, no, bro. The way to increase the size of the problem, which is the size of the sale, is to understand what is their perception of the problem. What maybe they believe out of the US that the size of the problem is Texas. And then to ask a certain amount of questions to understand what I believe the problem is. Because I'm like, well, you missed a few other states. Oregon, California, you missed Nebraska, you missed Kansas. And my experience, when I am uncovering these things and they're like, crap, the size of the problem increased because the size of their perception of the problem increased. So it's like if a patient walked into the office and the doctor asked the absurd question, do you need cancer treatment? They're like, I don't know, or I work with cancer patients to help them, da 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 da. And it's like, but I don't even know if I have cancer. So you're asking me, do I need a product to solve a problem that I don't even know that I have? And as a seller, it's your ethical duty to find out if they have that problem, especially when they didn't know. The great news about this is the majority of stuff about themselves, they don't know. So selling and prospecting both comes down to finding out deleterious information for your buyers that they weren't aware of. So step 1 and 2, I got 10 minutes left. We're not going to get to the 12 problems. We'll get to on the second webinar. But step 1 is uncovering their self-diagnosis and why they believe it. Step 2 is uncovering your diagnosis. In the second webinar, we're going to get into how to quote unquote challenge the difference. But step 3, which is the most important part, it's the fun part for me. Because this is me actually helping my buyer. I'm like, can we, again, I log on LinkedIn. It's like, we want to help we really want to help our buyer. I'm like, then why are we all piling into an objection handling webinar talking about what two words, tip, trick, blah, blah, to make them feel more heard so I can manipulate them into buying more? How I really help my buyer is by having looking out for them when they weren't even looking out for themselves. So at least they know. This is my favorite part of selling in general, because I'm like, now, if they don't do something about it at that point, you're like, hey, you have this really, I'm trying to stay off medical, but you have this really, really terrible thing going on in your body. And if you don't solve for this, you're going to die in 3 months or whatever it is. If they don't solve for it at that point, I, as a seller, feel way better that at least they know now, though. At least they know. So the third step to it is diagnosing problems that they didn't know about. I'll give you a great example. A lot of people come to me for cold emailing training, cold calling training, etc., for the quality of the cold call or cold email. But one massive problem that they don't know that exists, most buyers don't know that exists, is that the conversion from people who request a demo to who actually receive a first discovery call. I've looked at thousands of programs. The highest conversion that I've ever seen from someone who requests a demo to they actually get a first discovery call with an AE is 22.5%. The lowest that I've seen is 4% of people who are requesting a demo or to contact sales were actually getting a first call with sales because of all the process in between. Oh, okay, we're going to email you afterwards. We're going to qualify you. We're going to make you jump on a 15-minute call. Then we're going to ask you these brutal questions like, are you the decision maker? Do you have an authority? Do you have budget? What's your timeline to better gear for your demo? Even though if I have money or not does not help you better gear for a demo. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Then I'm going to schedule a call with an AE, and the AE might show up to it. They might not show up to it. And then they haven't read any of the discovery on the first end. So they're like, oh, okay, they're asking the same questions over to the prospect. The highest conversion I've ever seen is 22.5%. The median is around 9%. This is a problem that most people don't know about. So in discovery, I'll ask the question, I'll say, so for inbound, for instance, can you tell me, you mentioned that you have a team of 4 reps. What is the process from an inbound perspective? Let's say I request a demo. What happens then? And they're like, we round robin our leads around the SDR team. I'm like, oh, there goes 50% of their leads. And then I'm like, okay, so you round robin. What happens if I request a demo on the weekend? Let's say Saturday. What happens? They're like, oh, well, we follow up on Monday. I'm like, oop, there goes another 25% of the leads. Because I know that information. They don't know that information. Otherwise, I would have done something about it. I'm like, okay, so what's the goal of the conversation? Let's say, you do reach out to me with this sequence of 5-10 emails, blah, blah, blah. What's the goal of the conversation? To get them on a call. And I'm like, to do what? And they're like, to ask them some questions, like qualifying questions. They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, there goes another 10-15% of their leads. I know that information because it's my job to know that information. So the third step is, once I've uncovered their self-diagnosis, everything that they think and believe, and then I have asked a certain amount of questions to put together my own diagnosis. The third bucket is I'm asking them questions, what I call sign-based questions, to understand, do I believe that there's a problem that they don't know about? So you'll notice my 3 questions to them is, can you tell me about your inbound process? Are the leads round robin? What happens if I request a demo on a weekend? And what is the content of the discovery of the 15-minute call with the SDR? None of those are, do you believe that? What's the impact to you if you don't solve your inbound line? They're like, nothing, it's fine. Why? Because they do believe it's fine. But when they answer those questions, I'm like, they probably have a massive inbound problem. And they don't know it. So they're trying to solve for more pipeline because their AEs aren't hitting their rev quotas. They're missing their SQL targets. And they think it's because of email quality. And I'm like, we can talk about this email quality issue for a second, but the faster way is to I put in a quick process using Chili Piper, drove 70% more leads of conversion from inbound. So I'm like, yeah, we can talk about the outbound, but first let's fix this problem. Then you have way more SQL, so outbound takes less of a heat. So step 3 is diagnosing for them. I wouldn't ask a patient, do you think you have cancer? They don't know. So I'm asking them questions to understand, do they have a problem that people commonly have that they commonly don't know about? So how do I diagnose an unknown problem, like email deliverability, for instance, or inbound conversion? What do I believe is the root cause of it? So I'll say, hey, can you describe to me, you mentioned that there's inbound follow-up process. How many emails are they sending? How many calls are they making? How quickly are they making them on average? What is the content of those? Is there a Calendly link in there? Is there a scheduling link in there? Is there not? How often are they getting a hold of them? How many follow-ups are they sending, etc.? So I can understand the root cause. What is the process? What's the current impact of that? I'll usually ask them, hey, do you know, as a data point, how many people request a demo to actually get a discovery call? They never know that question. That's a current impact question. They don't realize that they're hemorrhaging leads. So I'm asking them for that data point conversion. They usually have to go dig for it. So future impact, they keep going. Current event trigger, future event trigger, and then prescription. But the third step here, so I'll summarize with this, and then we can close out. The 3 steps here are, number 1, how do I uncover all of their self-diagnosis? What have they self-diagnosed as the problem they want to solve, the root cause, the current impact, the future impact, the current event trigger that made them want to buy, the future impact that's happening in the future that makes them want to solve for the problem now, and the solution they believe that they need. They might not have all of them. Most cases they don't. Step 2 is, what do I believe all of that information is? And in my experience, about 90% of the time they're wrong to some degree. They've missed something. What do I believe the problem is? What do I believe the current impact is? Future impact, root cause, current event trigger, future event trigger. What do I believe all of it? That is. And then the third step, which is my most fun step, and it's probably the trigger that helps me know that I should still be in sales, is the reason it's the most fun is because then I get into all the problems that they don't know about that are hurting them, that can help them, that can truly help them. But the third step is, how do I diagnose problems that they commonly have for their buyer persona that they don't know about? That is discovery. So I'm going to finish up with saying this. We're going to send you the deck afterward. Look at all of this stuff I didn't cover. Look at that. Oh my God, Becc, get a life. We're going to go into the second webinar and how to challenge the difference. But in summary, I have a massive question for the sales community. We call it a discovery call. What on earth are we discovering? And I mean that. We trying to get them to, are we trying to discover what their pain is to manipulate them into saying yes? Are we trying to, when you're asking a question, your buyer's answering, are you busy thinking of your next question? After they answer your question, can you not remember? Are you demo and discovering in the exact same call? Because you can do that if you aren't actually diagnosing. But if you're truly after helping them, and I believe that we have that would be a preferred option if we knew, then none of that's going to work. So I'd anchor to my goal in discovery always, and selling always, is how do I understand the information that they don't that's going to hurt them so that I can help them? That is what the role is knowing more about them than they even know about themselves to help them. So we have an unbelievable opportunity here in sales, and that is to pivot sales back into something that wants to actually help someone, actually add value, and actually get them to a better state than they were before that conversation with you. Savannah, looks like we're up on time.
Yes, we are. And I just have to point out Erica's comment. She said, this webinar was very inspiring. It also feels like moms called us out. So I love that. Yes, packed full session, and we didn't even get to everything. So we'll be sure to send the recording and the deck to you all after we hop off. And the second session that Becc was referring to will be on the 15th of June. There'll be a link to register to that in the follow-up email as well.
If I haven't scared everyone.
Yeah. So be sure to sign up for that one so that you can get all the notifications and reminders for that as well. And thank you, Becc. Safe travel back.
Thank you.
Feeling better.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. This chat was going off, and it made me so happy, and I was reading stuff as I'm going. So I want to thank everyone for coming and making it so much fun today and engaging. And thanks, Savannah, for having me.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. And we'll see you all next time.